Zach, we are back and we are talking about 6 dynasty players that are worth the risk in buying. We don't normally try to add risk to our rosters, but these are some players that we feel comfortable enough doing it, whether it be the value, the upside. We're buying in, we're interested, and we hope you're interested in this video. Let us know by leaving a like on it, commenting down below some players that you believe are worth the risk. I know there's definitely some other players out there. These are just some players that we're buying in on. And if you want to talk about more players that we're buying in on, head over to patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Get in that Discord server for a free 7-day trial and see what we can do for your Dynasty rosters. But Zach, with all that said, all the promo in the books, let's get to your first risky candidate for risks to buy or sell. What do you got here?
Yeah, for me, I'm going to go Cooper Kupp. A lot of the community is down or just maybe not as high as they used to be on Cooper Kupp. And then, of course, there's the emergence of that offense with Puka Nacua, with Kyren Williams. And really what I'm looking at here is I'm looking at an opportunity to buy Cooper Kupp at what he should be valued as, which is probably the second option in that passing game. And potentially any game, he could be the first. You never know, where there's a game that's going to feature Cooper Kupp more than it's going to feature Puka Nacua. All the reports that are coming out as of today, right before we hit the record button, Bob, is that the offense runs through Kupp. That's the new update. It's on Sleeper. It's on all the post on Twitter, everything like that, that the offense is running through Cooper Kupp. I don't know how much I necessarily believe that the offense will run through Kupp, but I do think that he will be featured in this offense maybe a little bit more. You have to remember he was coming off an ankle injury. He missed the first 4 games last year. And then they were integrating that offense into what it ended up being towards the end of the season. And look, despite missing that time, despite the ankle injury, despite not being there for much of training camp at all, he was still a top 20 producers in the 9 games that he completed, the 9 games that he started and finished, because there was a game or two here where Kupp started and ended up not really finishing out the game. Another reason why I'm interested in Cooper Kupp is the price. Look, I looked at Dynasty Daddy. These were trades within the last 2 or 3 days. I found Cooper Kupp for Calvin Ridley straight up. I'd rather believe in Cooper Kupp at this point than Calvin Ridley. You look at that offense. Do I feel comfortable in an offense led by Will Levis? No. I feel comfortable in an offense led by Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay. Another trade I saw was Cooper Kupp and Aaron Jones for a 25-second. What are we doing? But that's some of the values you can get. These are not trades that we're making up, Bob. We are finding these completed trades on Dynasty Daddy that happened on Sleeper. They're aggregated from Sleeper into the Dynasty Daddy website. And then I saw somebody buy Cooper Kupp for Luke McCaffrey, Sam Howell, and a 2025 third-round pick. None of these trades are anything that breaks the bank. It doesn't make me worse in the long term. These are trades that, if you believe in Cooper Kupp, that I think they're fair, or you're just coming out on top and you're not really losing much if Cooper Kupp doesn't hit.
Yeah, I don't hate this. I don't know if I'm super in on it either, though. I think what the biggest hiccup for me is missing significant time with injuries over the last 2 seasons. And as players age, they don't normally get more healthy. Does he have a swan song of a good season left in him? I wouldn't be the first one to doubt it by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't know. I don't hate it at these costs. It always comes down to the cost, what my expectation is for him on my roster. At these prices, you're not buying him to be your wide receiver 2 or your wide receiver 1, maybe your 3, maybe your 4 even. So these costs, I don't hate it. I can't say I'm super in on it, but, from a value point, Zach, I don't hate it one bit. Moving on into my risky candidate, and this is certainly not as much of a risk as my next 2 player, but Chase Brown is a player I'm certainly interested in. And the risk here is simply you might not end up with much out of Chase Brown if Zach Moss ends up with the running back 1 role. Do I think that is set in stone? Everything we've heard out of camp from Chase Brown, camp or buzz, whatever you want to call it, I guess. It's a Chase Brown's taking reps with the ones, just got a bunch of props from his offensive lineman, Orlando Brown, today. You love to hear it. You got to take things with a grain of salt, but when you're hearing a lot of positive news, that's better than hearing a lot of negative news at the end of the day. Zach Moss is somebody we've talked about on this channel is just kind of being kind of mid, and Chase Brown has every opportunity to take this role. So why is he worth the risk? If Chase Brown ends up the running back 1 in Cincy, you're probably looking at a running back 2 floor at a running back 3 price. And I'm all about that. Right now, I have Zach Moss as Cincy's running back 1 in my 2024 projections, which you can get at patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind in the gold tier. And he's slotted in as a mid running back 2 However, if Chase Brown were to secure that role, he's probably a bit higher as a higher end running back too, as his floor. But we know, or we believe, that since the offense is going to be high powered, scoring a lot of points, he's going to be in position to put up points himself for your fantasy lineup. He's also just a second-year player who could hold this role for more than one season, although we don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. We don't want to label him as the Bengals running back one of the future. You get it. Looking at cost for Chase Brown, and that's probably what makes me the most excited about buying Chase Brown, is I can still get him at a relatively decent cost for what I expect out of him, or, baking some upside into the cost I'm acquiring him at. Looking at some completed trades recently by Dynasty Daddy in the last day, a second for Chase Brown. Saw that 5 times. So that's probably a pretty strict guideline of what his value is. I can't say I love that cost, because that is the risk of you could be spending a second round pick on a backup running back, which, hey, could be decent if Zach Moss were to miss time. Another trade, Najee Harris for Chase Brown in a second. All about that deal. I think Najee Harris is valued around a second round pick at this point. So getting Chase Brown on top, all the better. And then Zach Charbonnet for Chase Brown, who is a backup, like guaranteed, with no chance of being the running back one in his respective offense outside of injury. So I'm all about that. Don't know if it gets done, but there are definitely some wackier trades out there too for Chase Brown that have happened in the last couple of days. A first round pick, things like that I wouldn't consider great value. So I try to swoop in while you still can, while the value is still low. We've seen, as this news keeps trickling in with Chase Brown, that his value keeps kind of creeping up. So that's somebody I'm looking at despite the risk. Somebody I want to acquire at still a low cost. I wouldn't, but it's not a high cost, but it's also not a high reward. I think it checks out, though, for what I'm looking for in this type of topic. Zach, what are your thoughts on Chase Brown here?
Yeah, listen, I think a lot of what we're going to talk about in the video is the cost associated with the player. And in this scenario, they all just make sense. And look, I loved Zach Charbonnet coming out, but the fact of the matter is there's not a path to opportunity. Even if Zach Moss plays well, there are things that Chase Brown does better than Zach Moss, and then there's always the opportunity for Zach Moss to sustain an injury. It's not like listen, Zach Moss is 26 years old. What is wrong with the Dynasty community? You triggered me, and you did this on purpose. You wanted to get bulletin board material, so you brought up Zach Moss as a name because it triggers me, because Dynasty owners have been ridiculous with Zach Moss and their perceived values. Like, the dude is 26 years old. He's not going to be some RB1 out of nowhere because he was solid in a really good offense last year, ran by Shane Steichen, who ran a very competent offense in Philadelphia. Like, ask Miles Sanders if he misses Shane Steichen. Everybody just they get stuck in these scenarios. And to me, I love this name. I love this pick. Chase Brown, somebody that I have a lot of shares of, because even if Zach Moss is the RB1, Chase Brown will have his opportunities. And even then, I don't think he is the RB1. I think Chase Brown is the RB1 in that offense, and Zach Moss is the guy that will get the 45% to Chase Brown's 55%. So I think this is a great name. I think it's worth the risk. I love taking a chance on Chase Brown. And look, there's another scenario where, the Bengals are going to have to make some tough financial decisions in the next year or two. Just because they signed Zach Moss to a 2-year contract doesn't mean he's there for 2 years.
Zach, go ahead and dive into your next risky candidate here. I love this pick right off the rip. I'll say that. But why don't you talk about him? Tell me why he's a risk, why you're in on it, though, what it costs to go buy the guy.
Yeah, this is going to be James Conner for me. And the reasons for the risk are very obvious at this point. He's 29 years old. They just drafted another running back in Trey Benson, who everybody loves for whatever reason. I'm just kidding, not for whatever reason. There are reasons to like Trey Benson. And then, of course, there is the injury risk that follows James Conner every season. Like that's an actual thing. That's real. I'm not going to deny that. But here's the reasons why he is worth the risk. Since he arrived in Arizona as a 26 or 27-year-old running back, whatever it may be, he's finished as the RB7, the RB9, and the RB13 in fantasy points per game. On a per-touch basis, last season might have been his best season to date. Despite ranking 21st in total rushing attempts, Bob, he was 6th in rushing yards in the NFL. That's pretty efficient. He cracked 1,000 rushing yards in only 13 games last year. and he was 4th in yards per game ahead of perceived fantasy studs like Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, and Derrick Henry. So we continue to just forget James Conner exists for whatever reason. And I know that he's older and up there in age, but man, does he and look, he produced last year in a bad offense, in a terrible offense, as a matter of fact. Now you're bringing in things to open up the passing game. Marvin Harrison Jr., I think Michael Wilson takes a step forward. Trey McBride takes a step forward. Kyler Murray is 1 year healthier. There are things to open up that offense to make rushing lanes even better for James Conner. Look, I understand Trey Benson's there. I just think that at least for this year, it's still the James Conner show. We did this last year with Tank Bigsby, by the way. How'd that work out for us?
Not good.
No, not good at all. How are we buying James Conner? On Dynasty Daddy, I saw a lot of either 25 or 2026 second-round picks straight up. If I'm competitive, I will make that move. I will make that move if I'm perceiving my pick to be 209 or later. I also saw Aiden O'Connell in a 4th-round pick for James Conner. Like that deal. Even if Aiden O'Connell is respectable this year, they got to get another quarterback. They cannot keep doing this thing in Vegas if they want to. If Antonio Pierce wants to keep his job with Aiden O'Connell, okay. And then I saw a deal of James Conner for Wan'Dale Robinson. That's just somebody wanting to get off the age of James Conner and hit on Wan'Dale Robinson. Which, I mean, I'm semi interested in Wan'Dale Robinson, but not for James Conner. So, Bob, at these prices, are you willing to take the risk on a guy like James Conner?
Easily willing to take the risk. Trey Benson, as much as I like his situation in the future, there is stuff to be excited about as a prospect. Good draft capital, has some good film to him, some good advanced analytics, whatever you want to call it. But we're doing that thing again where we're getting too ahead on a rookie running back that was drafted in the 3rd round, albeit, but he's in the top 15 of running back rankings on Keep Trade Cut. Already too much expectations are being put on Trey Benson for year 1. James Conner, like you said, does have an injury risk. He will probably, it's safe to bet he'll miss a couple games. He has the last couple years, but he's still been very productive, very good in a very good rushing system, or at least he's been very good in this rushing system, as you noted as well. So at these costs, at a 2nd-round pick, I'm always going to be in on James Conner if I'm a competitive roster. Obviously, if you're not competitive, it's not really worth buying in. I'd like to take a moment to shout out today's partner, Mint Mobile. You and I both know that you're probably paying more for wireless than you should be. I know I was. For as little as $15 a month, Mint Mobile offers you everything you need. Whether it's speed, coverage, data, access to 5G, or unlimited talk and text. Mint Mobile keeps prices low by operating off the nation's largest 5G network and operating exclusively online. And that means no more pushy sales reps or waiting in long lines. On top of that, switching is easy and customer support is easily accessible through the Mint Mobile app, all from the comfort of your own home. Since making the switch myself, I'm still enjoying all of my favorite YouTube videos, streaming services, and catching up on my favorite podcasts without any drop in performance quality. Start saving today at trymintmobile.com/Dynasty Rewind. The link will be on your screen in the YouTube description box as well as the pinned comment below. Thank you so much for listening and choosing to support this brand. But with all that said, let's get right to the content you came for. We'll move on to one here that, Zach, I know you're not going to be a fan of because you've been very vocal against this player for a bit. And I don't think I have to mention too much when it comes to what his risks are. But Deshaun Watson is somebody who I am 1,000,000% falling for the trap for, because it just feels like at this point, it's too easy to acquire. It's too cheap for what the upside is. But looking at the risks, I can't imagine I have to say much. Only played 6 games in the last 2 seasons due to shoulder issues, and in those games he's played, he's not looked good. Admittedly, you have to imagine there's some rust from not playing full seasons. There's probably some continuity issues. He's not, getting to get reps with his receivers because he's missing so much time. There's a lot working against Watson that could be internal, but there's also plenty external working against him as well. But looking at why he might be worth the risk of buying into at this point. So go to any ranking platform. Deshaun Watson is consistently valued as a quarterback 3 in Superflex. And guess what? I'm not really expecting much out of my quarterback 3 in the Superflex anyway. Fill in on bye weeks, fill in on injuries, whatever the case is. That's all I really need you for. I don't need that much. So if he was valued as a top 10 quarterback, best believe I wouldn't even be considering this option because of all the question marks, all the red flags, all the issues. But at this point, all of the risk is baked into his cost, and he's accessible. And there's no one this low in ranks that holds higher realistic upside. And I'm not expecting a top 5 Deshaun Watson ever again. But if he hit top 12, top 15 numbers, would anyone really be all that surprised at this point? Because I certainly wouldn't, but I'm sure others would be because they're just that down on him. And I get it. Like I said, there's 2 years, 1 year taking off, and then 2 years of taking off with injuries, I guess you could say, but to kind of back that up. So, looking at a couple trades, sending a first straight up for Deshaun Watson. Right away, I will say I would not do that. If I'm sending a first, there'd have to be more coming back in the deal. I'm just not that comfortable, sending what is a valued first round pick at the end of the day, especially not for somebody who I perceive to be my quarterback 3. But if I'm sending it first, so I'd want something coming back in the deal, something more coming back in the deal as well. And then another trade I really liked, actually, Sam Darnold and Brian Robinson. I'm just not that in on Brian Robinson this year with this system coming into place. I do think Austin Eckler is going to take more from that backfield than people think. As old, quote unquote, and washed up as he is, I just think that. And Sam Darnold, as much as the Vikings quarterback has been fun, it's been Kirk Cousins. Sam Darnold is not a long-term thing. I think he's the journeyman bridge quarterback that'll be wandering around the league for a few years, most likely going to be a backup in a lot of situations. But that's a trade for Deshaun Watson that happened just today. And there's plenty of other ones similar to that. Gardner Minshew plus the 209 for Deshaun Watson. Another trade that just Gardner Minshew, I kind of expect to be the starter this season for the Las Vegas Raiders, at least for the most part of the season. At least I think that's what he starts out as. I don't know. It could be wrong. Deshaun Watson, if I get him on my roster as my quarterback 3 and he produces, like I said, top 12, top 15 numbers, that's a player that I can flip to trade down to another, lesser quarterback, whatever the case is, and get something else on top. I can use him to better another position, whatever the case is. So I'm not buying in for him to be anything more than my quarterback 3. And that's where I think that there is a reasoning to buying in on Deshaun Watson. There's so much upside baked in with the risk, baked in with the cost, that it might be worth doing. And like I said, I would not be the least bit surprised to see this blow up in my face. But like I said, I'm falling for the trap. I'm willing to take the risk on this guy because of the cost. Like I said, if he was valued as a top 10 quarterback, I wouldn't even blink at the guy. But Zach, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Deshaun Watson. If you're even the slightest bit interested, and maybe what a cost would be that you'd be interested in taking a swing at.
Talk about fitting the caption of the video.
Yeah, there you go.
I can't do it. I can't do it. I hear what you're saying. Your point is the value, and I get it.
Mm-hmm.
I can't disagree with that. There's just so much risk. His lack of production when he has played, and then his unavailability to play. It's not like he won't have a job. He will. They're forced to play him for about the next 2 years unless they want to break the Russell Wilson record for most dead cap money that a team is going to take and just completely rebuild, which we saw last year just with competent quarterback play. They're a playoff team. So I don't think that they're going to do that. They had the coach of the year, so on and so forth. And they've got a lot of older pieces there like Amari Cooper, David Njoku, so Nick Chubb, so on and so forth. So they're not going the rebuilding route. I just can't do it, bro. Oh, man,
I get it.
And I will disagree with you on your Brian Robinson point, too. I disagree with you.
It's all right.
Yeah, I think that, look, he was a top 10 running back before his injury last year. And part of that was the atrocious quarterback play of Sam Howell. If I'm going to sit here and say Sam Howell was the reason Jahan Dotson sucked last year, I'm also going to say Sam Howell was the reason that Brian Robinson was pretty good because he's throwing to him 10 times a game. Like that happened. But you also saw a thing of Brian Robinson that you didn't think. Like, he can be a pass-catching running back. And I don't disagree with you on your Austin Eckler point. I just think that there's room for that. And maybe Brian Robinson's not a top 10 running back. Maybe he's a top 15 or a top 18 running back. And I'd rather have that on my roster because I like having those running backs on my roster. I like having the safer floor running backs. Like, just give me 10 points this week and I'll have my boom wide receivers do all the work for me. Yeah, there's more that goes into to me not wanting to buy Watson. Of course, just his inability to produce for your fantasy teams, his inability to stay healthy. But it's just this to me is not somebody I am interested in. I'm not gonna say like I totally disagree with you. You do you. If you were asking me, should you do this? I would say no. I would say no. Yeah. But again, like, is the price overwhelming? No, it's not. And like, it's not like we've never seen Deshaun Watson be a top 5 quarterback before. We have. So that's why I'll say I don't hate it. Am I doing it myself? No. But I can see how this fits the caption of the video to a T.
To get off topic or stay off topic that much more, looking at Brian Robinson, and this is part of my crux with him, is that, looking at when he was a top 10 running back for the season, is he also had a later bye week. So that's, factoring in, he was still racking up points while other running backs were taking weeks off. But you look at his total season fantasy points per game, he ranks running back 22. So his goodness, I guess you could say, was kind of on the back of attrition, where he played most of the games, only missed 2 games on the year. So I don't know. I like I said, I'm not going to get too much into it, but that's part of why I'm still a little bit down on Brian Robinson. But Zach, we can move right on along into your next one here. I like this pick. I don't have any shares yet, unfortunately. But I'd like to change that. So Zach, tell me how to do it.
My last player for this video, Bob, is going to be Ladd McConkey. Probably a name that I'm not picking if we do this video a week or two ago. Some of the more recent news of Justin Herbert kind of affects this. But look, he's tethered to what seems to be a very run-heavy offense, and the Justin Herbert injury concerns. Look, if you don't know plantar fasciitis, there is no 2 injuries of plantar fasciitis are the same. We've seen players come back in 2 weeks. We've seen players come back in a year because they tear the plantar fascia after trying to come back. So this is an injury that you must treat with kid gloves. I would not be surprised to see Easton Stick start a game or two if Herbert has not recovered as much as they want. So look, that could affect Ladd McConkey. That could bleed into the regular season. So we're already talking about a rookie wide receiver on a run-heavy offense that could not have their starting quarterback. They could or couldn't. We really don't know. But I do think that Justin Herbert will be affected by the plantar fasciitis injury unless he's fully recovered. That's an injury that can linger. You can still play with it, but it is a very lingering injury and can limit the mobility of anyone who's playing it. So long term, I do believe that he becomes Justin Herbert's best friend on the football field, somebody that he's very reliant on. I almost relate it to a Cooper Kupp-esque, maybe not the athleticism of a Cooper Kupp, but the reliance of a Cooper Kupp. I put on the show sheet, good old reliable McConkey is what I think he's going to turn out to be. He's probably not ever going to be the wide receiver 1, but he's capable of putting up wide receiver 1 numbers in the future if this offense evolves from what it's going to be this year. I looked at some deals on Dynasty Daddy. There was definitely some deals that I would not have pulled myself, but I did pull a couple. And I liked the ones where I was tearing down from another wide receiver into McConkey. 2 that I found that I really liked: T. Higgins for Ladd McConkey and a 25 third-round pick. I'm just not the T. Higgins guy. I never have been, never will be.
Sure.
And Xavier Worthy for Ladd McConkey and a 25 second. There was a certain point in rookie drafts, I don't know exactly where, maybe at the start of rookie drafts or even a month after, where you could have gotten McConkey before Worthy in rookie drafts. So that deal is wild to me. If I could have pulled that off, I'd be so happy. But look, you can see we're getting training camp reports now. Everything you're seeing is oh, look at Xavier Worthy catch a 60-yard bomb in nothing but his underwear. And then you're not really getting the videos of Ladd McConkey that you are of Xavier Worthy. So I could see the hopium really affecting that trade there. So look, again, it's probably not a player that's going to help me too much in year 1. And there's a lot of risk associated with him in year 1, but I'm looking at the dynasty outlook. I like the profile of Ladd McConkey. I like the player, and I like that he's paired with a top 5 quarterback moving forward into the dynasty stratosphere, Bob.
Yeah, these trades are absolutely wild. I mean, T. Higgins for McConkey plus a 25 third is just bonkers, because it suggests with this next one that Xavier Worthy is more valuable than T. Higgins. And T. Higgins is still, love him or hate him, is the most valuable asset that's being discussed here, in my opinion, by a good margin. Still a very good, competent wide receiver, too, in fantasy and dynasty. But moving off of him for McConkey in a second would be better than a third. So I need that little bit more value personally. Moving off Worthy for McConkey in a second is just nuts to me. I mean, they were drafted very close, and just giving up a whole second to go get one or the other is nuts to me as well. I don't hate the straight up pivot, but even then at that point, you can't, with coming off a rookie draft, even if they were drafted in the startup, I guess, you can't put them neck and neck. There's just, because it's back to that never trade 1 for 1 at the same position, because you're just telling that person oh, I'd rather have that wide receiver, make them pay to do that. Make it worthy of the transaction, full pun intended. Yeah, I don't hate the buy here, Zach. I like McConkey a good bit. I would like to have him on more of my rosters. Yeah, I think another way you could pivot is buying or selling one of these aging vets too, to maybe a team looking to be more competitive with all his McConkey news with Justin Herbert being banged up, whatever the case is, how this offense aims to pan out, have them being very run heavy by pass percentage this year. Mentioned that in the last video, but either which way, we will move along into the last one. I know you're buying in on this risk, Zach, and this risky candidate is Kyren Williams. What's the risk? Why the risk? What are the risks? We've heard it more times than I can count. He's a day 3 running back, and they never last. But on top of that, we've had the addition of third-round rookie running back Blake Corum, who I do like a good bit as a prospect, but not enough to project him to take over this backfield at any time in the near future, or really any time in the future. The biggest concern for me, or the biggest risk for me, you have the injury risk with Kyren, who's certainly proven the inability to stay healthy over the last 2 years. And, you know, instead of selling Kyren Williams, though, I'd rather buy Blake Corum, use him as a handcuff, than sell Kyren Williams. And I mentioned that before plenty, is that the right move instead of selling Kyren is to buy Blake Corum. So why is Kyren Williams worth the risk? Zach, you said it in a previous podcast. Kyren Williams is not Dameon Pierce, who is often the poster child of day 3 running backs who have not panned out. But Kyren Williams didn't just have the volume last year. He also produced with it and was incredibly efficient with his touches. 10th in yards per carry after contact, 11 in missed tackles forced, total missed tackles forced despite missing 5 games, 6th in yards per attempt, 6th in touchdowns despite missing 5 games, 7th in most runs of 10 plus yards despite missing 5 games. This all led to a 21.2 fantasy points per game in PPR scoring. And before anyone tries to continue to tell me that this is a fluke, I went back 10 years to see what other running backs put up 20 plus points per game in a season, and none of them are fluky players. None of them are players that have not done their time in the league, stuck around as a top running back asset for a good chunk of time. Going down this list, I know some of these endings have not been great. Keep that in mind, though, that these players were highly valued and highly productive for a good long while before their careers came to an end. Le'Veon Bell, DeMarco Murray, Matt Forte, Arian Foster, Devonta Freeman, Jamal Charles, David Johnson, Ezekiel Elliott, LaShawn McCoy, Todd Gurley, Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, Melvin Gordon, James Conner, Kareem Hunt, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, Austin Eckler. All of those guys are players that you've been able to have in your lineup for the most part when healthy and have elite running back production. And looking at my 2024 fantasy football projections, which you can get patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. In that gold tier, Kyren Williams is slotted in as my running back 11, which I feel is a very modest projection for him at what is most likely his floor. Looking at how I'm going to buy. So recent trades from Dynasty Daddy for Kyren Williams, David Montgomery plus a 26th third round pick for Kyren Williams. Yes, please. I think you need to make this a second round pick to even have a chance for this happening for most managers. But there's clearly a value gauge difference on Kyren Williams from where I value him to where a lot of people seem to value him. Another trade, 25 first plus a 24 plus the 24, 304 for Kyren Williams. All about this deal. Rashad White plus Roman Wilson for Kyren Williams. All about that one as well. Alvin Kamara and a 26 first for Kyren Williams. I don't love this as much giving up because I believe Alvin Kamara can produce good running back numbers this year. Yes, Kyren Williams might be able to give me slightly better numbers or better numbers longer, but I have to give up that first to do it. I don't know if I just love the schematics of this deal, so it's hard. You know, I'd maybe be more willing to move a player of similar value. Like if I have an extra wide receiver kicking around that's a little younger, a prospect of that similar value, maybe I'd be more willing to do that. But as is, I don't love the schematics. The last example, Zay Flowers for Kyren Williams. Depending on roster makeup, what I need, I'm fine with this deal either which way. I'd sell Kyren Williams probably for Zay Flowers. It'd be tough, though, honestly, depending on what my roster is trying to do, because I love Kyren. I like Zay, but I love Kyren. So depending on what I'm doing with this roster, I like this deal as well. Zach, I got to ask, are you buying or selling this risky candidate at these costs with all the concerns in play?
I'm buying Kyren Williams. I always boil these kinds of players down to one thing, and it's not fantasy related. It's real life related. And we can take this with a few other players, right? We can take this with Dameon Pierce. We can take this with Amon-Ra St. Brown. We can take this with Kyren Williams. when they are playing and when they are putting up these astronomical numbers, or Dameon Pierce's case, they weren't astronomical, but they were good. Dameon Pierce's numbers his rookie season were good. Was the team winning when this happened? With Amon-Ra St. Brown, his breakout was the second half of his rookie year. That team started like 0-11 and finished the season 3-4 when he went nuclear. Okay, Kyren Williams last year, when he was out last year, that was a different offense, and that is why Blake Corum is here. When Dameon Pierce was doing what Dameon Pierce did, the Houston Texans were still like the second overall pick in the NFL draft that year. So it's not like the offense relied on Dameon Pierce to have success. And that's probably something I should have looked at last year and said to myself, I'm never going to look back at the Dameon Pierce situation and say I should have said to sell him in that offseason, just because I'm not that person. I'll just say I was wrong. I was wrong on my assessment of that situation, and I should have looked at, did that team's offense rely on Dameon Pierce to win football games? And the answer to that was no. I'm all in on Kyren Williams still. I'm obviously tempering my expectations a little bit. I think there's some kind of a timeshare, whether that's 60-40, 70-30, whatever it may be. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay. And I understand that is not a bad thing overall if it extends Kyren Williams to, say, play 14 games instead of play 12 games. I'm the safer floor player. You know that. I'm not the riskier player. I'm the safer floor player. Give me 14 games of less consistent production than 12 games of higher production. I'll take that.
But while that is it for the video today, I do hope that y'all enjoyed. Please leave a like, comment down below some players you believe are worth buying the risk on. We want to hear about it down in the comments below. And the one thing that carries no risk, only rewards, heading over to patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind, getting in that Discord server for a free 7-day risk-free trial. We hope to see you there. We hope to help out your fantasy teams over there. And if you'd like that much more help with your rosters, check out the pinned comment below or the YouTube description box on details on how to get your very own roster reviewed. But with all that said, all the promo in the books, we are going to get the heck on out of here. We will see you in the next one. But until then, I hope that y'all have a good one.